Blessings, beloveds. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Let's talk about the final full moon for 2020. Pretty exciting times, really, leading us into 2021. And yeah, what a year it's been, right, for 2020. I hope you guys had a great Christmas, for those of you that celebrate it. And, wishing you all the best, of course, for 2021. Even though the true new year actually begins on the 21st of March, which is when the sun ingresses into Aries, 0 degrees Aries, corresponding with the seasons relative to the tropical zodiac. That is the true new year. However, relative to man-made calendar, we celebrate the new year at the end of December. Anyway, that aside, okay, so this particular full moon is a very sensitive full moon, of course, because it's in the sign of Cancer. The moon rules Cancer, so, it's in its home sign. And most would think that, well, because it's in rulership and it's in its own home sign, that, that it's really great, it's really fantastic, it's really strong, and so forth. And yes, in some ways it is, but on the other hand, we do need to recognize the sheer vulnerability and sensitivity of a moon in Cancer, and especially a full moon in Cancer. Honestly speaking, through my observations through the years, even people who just have their natal moon in Cancer, whilst it's in rulership and therefore it scores a lot of points, so it's a very strong moon, and creatively it has tremendous potential. In fact, the moon in Cancer produces some of the world's greatest artists, because the imagination, when the moon is in Cancer, is incredibly fertile and rich. So it's really, really wonderful, when we're talking about creativity, imagination, because the archetype Cancer does correspond to the past, including for those that are open to past lives and so forth. It retains memory in the emotional body, and thus why it's so extremely sensitive and responsive and reactive to its environment, to anything within its environment. So a full moon in Cancer is a very, very volatile, emotionally reactive full moon. So there are some good aspects to this full moon, which I'll go into in a moment when I bring up the chart. But I'm just wondering how many of you actually listened to my podcast that I recently did with DJ Nocturne. I'd be interested to hear, your thoughts and your feedback. I spoke about the age of Aquarius and the Saturn Jupiter conjunction. Just interested to know how many of you heard that particular podcast. And so that leads me to, the importance of this time of the year relative to what we're shifting into. This full moon it's not an eclipse, it's a regular full moon. So what we need to do is we need to look back to where this lunation cycle began, which was a couple of weeks ago when we had the solar eclipse in Sagittarius at 23 degrees of Sag. So for your own personal reference, it is worth actually looking at where this solar eclipse occurred in your chart, where 23 degrees of Sagittarius sits in your birth chart, so that you can find some connection to this full moon, because it is connected. It's the same lunation cycle, as it were, even though the new moon was a solar eclipse and belongs to a particular Saras cycle. It is still a lunation cycle for this month. So, two very different signs, Sagittarius and Cancer, couldn't be more different, as a matter of fact. But nevertheless, there is a connection here, because this full moon began somewhere right? It had to begin somewhere, obviously, and that was 2 weeks ago, 23 degrees of Sag. So just take note of where that was for you. And when you're tracking this moon relative to where it's going to illuminate in its full position in your chart now, when we have this full moon, then you can possibly draw some correlations and connections relative to this lunation cycle and what this lunation cycle is highlighting, drawing out for you. Now, full moons, as we know, are very loaded on in terms of our emotional body particularly, and Cancer rules the emotional body as well. So we have, it's really a double signature here, you know, of the Cancer archetype. Cancer, the moon, full moon, moon rules Cancer. So you can see that it's a very, very emotionally loaded moon. Now, Cancer is a sign that correlates to our self-image, the ego, the personality. It's the it's the identity that the soul creates, which becomes like a projector. You know, the soul needs a projector to express itself through, as it were. You know, it needs the personality, the ego. Hence why, you know, we are born, we take on this particular body, we have a particular identity and so forth. That's in order for the soul to have a vehicle of expression relative to what it's trying to evolve through, learn, experience, understand, connect with, and so forth. So it's interesting because the full moon, clearly it's opposite the sun. That is always what a full moon is. It's a sun-moon opposition. And so, of course, the sun is in Capricorn, which is the opposite sign to Cancer. And so there's an interesting cardinal T-square taking place with this particular full moon, which involves the planet Chiron, because Chiron is in Aries at the moment, as most of you are aware. And so this Chiron, the Chiron position, is actually forming a square to this full moon in Cancer. So we have 3 cardinal signs activated in a T-square during this full moon. Now, cardinal energy is very powerful because it corresponds to initiation and action. It's about putting ourselves out there. But we need to go back and just kind of break it down in very simple terms by understanding the nature of these 3 archetypes: Aries, Cancer, and Capricorn. So Aries is purely the self, the identity as it's born. There is no form and structure to it yet. It's just purely, it's purely an energy that, how can I describe it? It's literally like birth. When a baby is born, it is yet to discover who it is, what it's going to form into, develop into, what sort of life it's going to have, and so on and so forth. So it's just the pure, raw essence of ego personality, you could say. Very innocent, very, very innocent. It hasn't taken on any form or conditions or labels or judgments or anything of that nature. As it starts to progress around the zodiac wheel, then those other layers begin to form and create the subsequent conditioned layers and imprints in the psyche of the human being. So here we have the moon in Cancer, which corresponds to, as I said, our self-image. And this self-image really connects to security. You know, that's why they say the archetype of Cancer corresponds to security, the security that we feel within ourselves, or lack of it for that matter, you know, depending on what kind of life we've had and so forth. So that's why Cancer is quite a vulnerable and sensitive sign and can feel quite threatened and quite insecure quite easily, actually. It is the sign, the archetype though, that is teaching us that whilst we create a personality and ego and identity that is projected out there and we start looking for our sense of security outside of ourselves, which is the opposite sign, Capricorn, right? Capricorn gives us that external level of consciousness, identity, purpose, you could say, relative to who we are in this life, what we are trying to achieve, and so forth. But it's impinged on this external sense of security. Cancer is all about the heart, soul, the inner world, the inner life, and developing and cultivating a sense of security from within, and fundamentally realizing, as we go around the wheel of the zodiac and we form and develop and create and cultivate all the different facets to our being and our beingness, our becomingness, we eventually, when we get to, the 12th sign, which is Pisces, we come to the closure, to the completion, to the end of the cycle. And it's kind of like standing, on a ledge, having been through the entire wheel and reflecting and assessing on who we have become, as it were, and then dropping it all, really, surrendering, 12th house, Pisces. So the moon in Cancer, or even the archetype Cancer, is primarily trying to teach us about cultivating a deep inner sense of security. So this full moon can very likely bring up these sorts of themes relative to wherever it is in your chart. Now let me just, in fact, bring up the chart for this full moon. Okay. So this chart is drawn for Melbourne, Australia, which is my current location. Obviously, it's going to look different based on your location, and it's not really important unless you're wanting to assess the chart for your location. But the more important thing to do would be to just place the full moon in your birth chart. Where is 8 degrees of Cancer located in your chart? Which house is it in? That's going to be the area that's going to be lit up and illuminated, as always, with every full moon. So you can see here the full moon is at 8 degrees and 53 minutes of Cancer. There's the sun right opposite. Let me just get my little drawing tools again. How do I... Okay, never mind. You guys can't see this, but there's a thing here that I need to move. Okay, so there it is. I'm just going to draw a... Oops, I've added Venus. Disregard that. Just a bit difficult to navigate this little digital pen sometimes. Okay, so here's the moon in Cancer. Here's the sun in Capricorn. The degree is 8 degrees and the minutes are 53. Now here's Chiron, okay, which forms a square to the moon, and as I said, it forms a square to the sun as well. Now that's a fairly tight square relative to orbs. For those of you that are interested in orbs or use orbs, orb just simply means what is the distance between one body to the other. What is the distance between them, and how much difference is there relative to them being exact? So, the sun is 8, the moon is 8, and Chiron is 5. So what does that mean? That means that we have 3 degrees that separates them, right? It's not very much. It's a very tight orb. So Chiron has quite a influence and is really speaking to this full moon. And so the story that I see here, I suppose, when we're talking about it from the point of view of this lunation cycle, the last month of the year, the end of the year, the end of a pretty intense, volatile year that has created so many different things for so many different people. And so here we are closing it all in now, as it were, relative to the moon, the lunation cycle. There's a number of other things going on, as there always is, but we're just really focusing on the full moon. So Chiron, who recently went direct, and I did a video for that, which was my last video. I know a few of you have watched that, so thank you for watching. I hope that you guys were able to get something out of that. So what we're dealing with here is Chiron in Aries, which very much corresponds to our own sense of identity. You know, going through a deep journey of healing our actual identity, who we have become, who we are wanting to become, who we have been perhaps as well. And so what are the connections around any sort of sense of pain or deep pain or deep sense of rejection at times as well? Because Chiron, and this is rarely mentioned, but it should be, because Chiron corresponds to the experience of the fear of rejection, because that's what happened to him when he was born. Both of his parents rejected him, and it's a very important detail that is very rarely mentioned. And so I like to bring it up every time I mention Chiron, because it's an important part of his mythology and pathology that we need to understand. He is the healer without question. He is the wounded healer, as he is often referred to. So we have Chiron squaring the sun and the moon. So there's some tension implied here. Squares always promote a sense of tension and conflict, and it is usually something that is experienced from within ourselves. It can obviously be projected outside of ourselves as well, but generally a square aspect will be something that we feel very deeply inside ourselves, and sometimes that can be difficult to pinpoint, to articulate, to even understand. And sometimes it's just a journey or a process or an experience. It could be a day or two or a week where we feel this turmoil, you know, this motion of things being stirred up inside us, and sometimes it's very difficult to try and understand what that is or what it's connected to. And it's also very challenging to you can't stop it. And so my experience has been through the years, when we go through those sorts of days or weeks or months or however long it may be, there are things we can do to support the process, of course, but it's not about resisting it or denying it. It's more about allowing it to wash through you, as it were. It needs to be filtered and experienced and churned over and then ultimately released. That's a form of healing. It is when we suppress or deny or resist that we create more blockages or more difficulties, really, because suppressed energy will eventually have to be released. And when something is blocked and suppressed for a long period of time, it has various consequences, and some of which connect to health as well. You know, by suppressing and denying, we're just blocking an energy that needs to be released and needs to just flow in a particular direction. As uncomfortable as that is, and it usually is, it's not a comfortable experience, but such is life. You know, life is not, as I frequently say, it's not a walk in the park every day, and we have to go through these various types of inner emotional shifts, spiritual shifts, psychological shifts, and so forth. And so, you know, full moon in Cancer, very volatile energy, very sensitive. It does connect to the family and the home, the land, your soul tribe, your tribe. So it is very much about those sorts of aspects of your life. And so the square to Chiron is pointing us to some story here that is very much about our own inner sense of security. Cancer, Chiron in Aries, our own sense of identity. And the Capricorn component is the ability to have that conscious, realistic, if you like, connection to that, and how does that fit for you at this point in time. So there's some sort of tension there relative to your inner security, your outer security, perhaps conditioned layers that you are becoming aware of, trying to shift, trying to decondition. And Uranus, which I'll talk about in a minute, is going to help this process. The Chiron's going to bring up a sore spot relative to inner and outer security and our own sense of identity within that picture, right? And Uranus, which is just over here, let me get my little pen. Okay, so there's Uranus. And now Uranus forms a trine to the sun in Capricorn, and therefore it forms a sextile to the moon. So we're talking about, as I said, 3 cardinal signs, Capricorn, Aries, and Cancer, in the formation of a T-square, which promotes tension. However, it also promotes change, but it's not a comfortable process to go through. On the other hand, Uranus, which corresponds to freedom and liberation, authenticity, and facilitating our path of individuation, which simply means becoming more aligned, becoming authentic, being able to express our own authenticity from the point of view of who we are becoming, who we are learning to become, from a deep, authentic level within our heart and soul. So a trine and a sextile aspect, which is what Uranus has to this full moon, is a very supportive energy. There's no resistance with this. There's no blockage. There's no conflict. There's no tension. It's a supportive energy that facilitates the connection of Uranus to this full moon, to the sun and the moon. And so, as I said, Uranus being about freedom and enabling us to cultivate a further sense of authenticity in our life, then the issues that will be highlighted with the full moon are issues around security. And Uranus is saying, it's okay, I'm supporting you through this process of having a better understanding of your inner security, your outer security, and how can that be more authentic for you, so that it's not hooked into or premised on a level that isn't really authentic for you. That's what this Uranus brings into this picture, and it's assisting the full moon for us to be able to navigate our way through this, to see more clearly, because it is a full moon, and the full moon always illuminates. So the issues that will come up are the issues that I've addressed, and as I said, Uranus will support this process, which is really wonderful, actually. Now, Uranus is, a very, very eccentric energy. It's very different to the sun and the moon, Cancer and Capricorn. Cancer and Capricorn, I would have to say, are the 2 most traditional signs outside of Taurus in the entire zodiac. They're very traditional, and they are both impinged on security, one on inner, one on outer. Cancer inner, Capricorn outer. And so Capricorn, of course, corresponds to conditioned layers. So there are some issues here that we can possibly become more aware of within our own selves and our life at this point in time, relative to our own pathway, our own life story, our own journey, our own evolution, and how we can actually foster into this reality of our own life, into our journey, into the paradigm that we see before us. How can we foster the Uranian element, bring that in, cultivate it, so that we can bring forth a greater sense of authenticity in our life journey? That's what I see about this full moon in a nutshell. So I will probably leave it there, but because I wanted to make this a fairly quick video. But before I do, I just wanted to mention, you see, transiting Mars over here is currently at 26 degrees of Aries, and I'm very grateful for that, because the last couple of weeks, as it was applying to a square to Pluto, which is up here, right, Pluto in Capricorn, I've personally felt the last couple of weeks have been there have been a lot of things, but it's been a really intense process for me personally, because there are really big things happening with Pluto and Mars to my natal chart at the moment. So this collective transit between Mars and Pluto has really hit off my own Mars and Pluto, right? So it's been a really intense process, and it hasn't been easy. It really hasn't been easy. So, and transiting Mars was also conjunct Eris. So you can see this is Eris, the goddess Eris, right? She's at 23. So up to a few days ago, Mars was exactly on Eris, and that's a really volatile, conflicting energy. It can bring up a lot of anger. Mars square Pluto can bring up a lot of anger. It's such an intense energy that really needs an outlet, and because Mars in Aries especially can be so reckless, so impulsive and impatient, it can act just without any thought, and it can be quite a dangerous energy, actually, at worst, of course. So anyway, I'm glad that has eased off, because that's been a pretty testing little transit there that's been occurring the last couple of weeks. The other thing that we've recently just had is the Vesta, transiting Vesta. Here she is here, opposite Neptune. Beautiful energy, that one. That's all about your own spiritual practice, your spiritual cultivation, spiritual development, and just how you're able to actually balance the Pisces Virgo polarity here with Neptune and Vesta, in the sense of, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but sometimes it can feel like the spiritual, for lack of a better word, because that word is used so loosely these days, it's sort of lost its essence, I feel, sometimes, because it's used so much in a non-meaningful way a lot of the time. But the spiritual essence within us, that vibrates within us, is so much, it's infinite, so it's beyond our comprehension of the left brain. But the Pisces Virgo always brings us back to this space within ourselves of realizing and stepping into reality, Virgo, our imperfections, if you like, and really staying grounded and connected to the physical body as well. Understanding what it means to be disciplined, committed. Vesta is devotion and commitment, particularly to our spiritual life. I mean, it can be devotion and commitment to anything she chooses to focus that energy on, but she's a very mystical, complex goddess. As I've said before, when Kronos, Saturn, swallowed all of his children, and she's one of his children, she was the last one to come out of his stomach, as it were. So she spent the longest time inside Kronos, and there's a very big mystical component to that as to why she did that. And so she very much points to the work that we do through the flame in our heart and soul. So dedication and devotional practices and work. So that's been a really beautiful transit that we've had, that we've been able to work with relative to our own spiritual practices, and also remembering that nothing is perfect in this third dimension reality, at least. So we're not here to be perfect. We are here to remember who we are, and remembering who we are requires an evolutionary process. So we need to have multiple experiences to develop and evolve and grow, to ultimately get to a position where we don't need those experiences anymore. And that's when I think we've completely merged back with Source. And so whether we continue to evolve after that, I really don't know. I'm not Source itself. I'm an aspect of Source, as you are, so I don't have all the answers. But the sense I get is that the more we remember who we are, the less we tend to need to have these external experiences, because then the more we remember who we are, the less we are projecting as well. It's quite a complex subject, but anyway, this Vesta Neptune has been an important process relative to our own spiritual development here on the earth plane, because this is where we do this is this is where we do the most work on this physical plane. I don't know this for sure, I can't prove it, but my sense is that we do lots of other work in the spiritual realms when we leave this body, but the work that we do in those other levels of consciousness is very different. And I feel that the hardest work relative to our evolution is here on the earth plane. There's no more difficult place to be in than here. So this concept that people have of hell being somewhere out there, perhaps down the bottom, as a place that people go to for punishment and so forth, and I don't mean to offend anybody, for anybody who has that belief, I just don't subscribe to that belief, because I feel and believe that heaven and hell, if we want to use those terms and concepts, is right here on earth, and it's just based on our level of perception and consciousness and experience. And so there is no such thing as punishment from a figure behind the clouds that gives that punishment to you or to me, to anybody. It's just growth and evolution and becoming more conscious. And just one final point that I've really been reflecting on a lot lately, and it just sort of became very, what's the word? I've really just been thinking about this a lot. I think about this all the time, but the last few days especially. Sometimes because of this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which occurred on the solstice on the 21st of December, which, as I've said, is a 20-year cycle to begin with, and then it's really a 200-year cycle. So, in other words, whatever that conjunction is going to bring to our field of experience and our field of consciousness is yet to be seen. We have clues because we understand the meaning of Jupiter and Saturn, we understand of the meaning of Aquarius, and we understand what Pallas Athena means as well, because she's there in that pack with Jupiter and Saturn leading that pack, that family. We've got 3 generations there: Saturn, Jupiter, Pallas Athena. Pallas Athena, as I said, is the daughter of Jupiter, the granddaughter of Saturn. There's something very, very poignant, very powerful about that triple conjunction. And because it's a conjunction means that something is being born. What is going to form and develop is very unknown. And so sometimes I just get the sense that people who post material or make videos, who make certain claims, I guess, with great conviction, can be very misleading to a lot of people, because the part of us that is the personality and the ego can be very impatient, and we've developed a society that has become so impatient and just wants everything instantly, right now. I want it right now, and that's partly because of the level of expansion of technology, the accessibility to that, and how easy it is to have things right now. I want this information, I want that, I want this, I want that, and you just click of a button and boom, you're there. And so it's created this whole thing about where we don't know how to relax, we don't know how to be patient, how to just kind of step back, chill out, let the energies just be, let life be. Eckhart Tolle said that. I love his work, Eckhart Tolle. One of his most beautiful lines was, let life be. And that's very, very, it's very meaningful if you really understand that. And so I just want to say that yes, there are a lot of significant shifts and changes going on, and we have, the level of the collective, and then we have our own personal level as well. I might just get rid of that because I am going to go in a second. But let's just try to remember that, and I said this yesterday on one of my Facebook posts, the biggest shift that's going on always is within. It's inside you. So think about this. If you were to wake up tomorrow and just take a look around in your environment, wherever you live, and there wasn't anything, unexpected that happened, it was just another sort of kind of day, very similar to the day you have today. If you weren't thinking about anything, there would just be this sense of stillness. There would just be this sense of, well, there's really not much happening. The sun's out, people are walking around. It's kind of like nothing, right? There's not much happening. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that this desire to want these changes to happen yesterday, it just creates disturbance in our mind, so we need to learn to remember that the shifts are happening, but they are happening largely within. And so we need to have patience. We need to have patience with ourselves and just with evolution, period. Nothing happens overnight, nothing. When you have a huge event take place, there's been a culmination of things that have been leading up to that point. Nothing happens just like that for no reason. And the dark night of the soul, again, I don't know why it's called the dark night of the soul. That's a process and a journey as well. Nothing happens instantly, and I think we kind of forget that. We have all these extraordinary phenomena taking place with these incredible planetary aspects and so forth, and people are like, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for me? And how's it going to change my life? And it's like, whoa, chill, just step back a bit. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but what you feel, what you sit with, what you accept, what you are curious about, and what you explore is more important than knowing exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. So I'll leave it there. Happy New Year, guys, even though it's not the true New Year. But Happy New Year nevertheless, and I'll see you guys in 2021. Can't believe I'm saying that. It's amazing, but much love and blessings. Thanks for watching. Bye.